The doorbell rang just as dusk settled over Evan Miller's quiet Vermont street, and in that small moment, something inside him shifted, though he did not yet understand why. He had told himself the evening would be ordinary, leftover dinner, a muted TV, another night passing without meaning, but when he opened the door and saw his two aunts standing there, travel bags in hand, the routine cracked. Aunt Laura stood straight and calm, her eyes warm and observant, while Aunt Diane smiled wide, her energy filling the doorway before she even stepped inside. They said it was just a visit, a short stay, nothing planned, and Evan nodded, believing them because it was easier than wondering. He welcomed them in, noticing how their presence instantly changed the air of the house, as if the rooms themselves were waking up after a long sleep. The lights felt softer, the silence less heavy. Evan moved quickly, offering coffee, clearing space, speaking politely, but inside, memory stirred, family holidays, laughter, a time when his life felt fuller. As they sat together, rain began tapping the windows, steady and gentle, matching the quiet rhythm of the moment. Evan listened as his aunts talked about the drive, about small things, but he felt their attention on him, careful and kind, as if they were seeing beyond his calm face. He had learned how to look fine, how to keep his voice steady, how to avoid talking about the year that had taken so much from him. After his relationship ended, not in anger but in quiet understanding, something inside him closed. He never told anyone how much it hurt because there was no dramatic ending to explain, only absence. Love had left softly, and that made the loneliness louder. Sitting there now, with family close, Evan felt exposed in a way that scared him. His aunts asked how work was going, how the town felt, how he was sleeping, and he answered quickly, keeping things light, but they did not push, which somehow made it harder. The clock ticked, the rain continued, and Evan felt the weight of all the evenings he had spent alone in that same room. He wondered if they noticed how carefully the house was kept, how nothing felt lived in, how it was a place meant for one person only. Aunt Laura looked around slowly, taking it all in, and Evan felt seen. Aunt Diane laughed softly, telling a small story from the past, and Evan smiled, but his smile felt thin. He remembered how, once, he had imagined filling this house with shared mornings and late-night talks, plans that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. As the night deepened, Evan felt tired in a way sleep never fixed. He realized he had been moving forward without direction, surviving instead of living. His aunts stayed longer than expected, unhurried, as if they had nowhere else to be, and for the first time in months, Evan did not rush the evening away. When they finally settled into the guest room, Evan stood alone in the living room, listening to the rain, feeling something unfamiliar rising in his chest, not pain, not comfort, but anticipation. He did not know why their visit felt different, only that it did. He turned off the lights and headed to bed, unaware that this simple knock at the door was the first step toward a change he had quietly stopped believing was possible. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently through Evan's kitchen window, and he found himself sitting across from Aunt Laura and Aunt Diane, coffee in hand, feeling more exposed than he had the night before, though he couldn't explain why. The previous evening had left him restless, thoughts circling like leaves caught in wind, and now, with the soft hum of the morning, his aunts began to speak, not about trivial matters, but about life itself, about choices, about love and loss. Laura's voice was calm but firm, asking him how he truly felt, while Diane's tone was light, peppered with humor that made Evan laugh, though the laughter felt like a crack in a frozen surface. At first, he tried to keep answers short, neutral, as if the words themselves could hide the emptiness he had learned to carry. But their eyes, patient and warm, refused to let him retreat. He began to speak, haltingly at first, about the breakup that had left him hollow, the quiet way love had slipped through his fingers, and the months that followed where he had kept himself busy but never whole. They listened without judgment, nodding, offering small acknowledgments, and in that gentle attention, Evan felt both relief and fear, because he was admitting feelings he had avoided for so long. Diane shared a story of a love she had walked away from, a decision that had cost her years of hesitation, while Laura spoke of waiting, of learning to trust her heart again after disappointment, and Evan realized how much courage it took to be honest with oneself. The conversation moved fluidly, covering old dreams, regrets, and small triumphs, creating a space where Evan felt safe to open parts of himself that had been locked for years. Then, unexpectedly, the tone shifted. His aunts revealed that their visit was not random. They had sensed the weight he carried, the quiet strain in his voice on phone calls, the subtle sadness in his eyes, and they had come intentionally, not just to see him, but to remind him that he was not alone, that his story was not finished. Evan's chest tightened, a mix of surprise, gratitude, and a strange fluttering he couldn't name. He realized how much he had missed connection, real connection, the kind that doesn't rush, doesn't demand, simply observes and supports. The aunts encouraged him to consider life beyond routine, to allow himself to feel, to hope, and to accept that vulnerability was not weakness but a door to new possibilities. Evan found himself imagining life differently, picturing mornings filled with conversation, laughter echoing through rooms, small adventures, and shared moments that had once seemed impossible. Even as they spoke, he felt a flicker of excitement he hadn't noticed in months, the kind that comes when someone opens a window in a dark room. The morning passed quickly, the rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and bright, but Evan's mind was already elsewhere, turning over the idea that life could be more than surviving day to day. His aunts packed lightly for the day's plans, yet he noticed the care they took in small gestures, in making sure he felt included, seen, and understood. Evan's heart felt tender, vulnerable, and yet strangely energized, as if the conversation had awakened something he thought he had lost. By midday, he was laughing more freely, engaging in small talk that didn't feel forced, feeling the warmth of family as a lifeline rather than a memory. And in that quiet, unassuming moment, he sensed that the evening would bring more changes, that this visit, simple as it seemed, was becoming a turning point, a beginning disguised as a casual call from two aunts who knew just when to arrive and how to reach the parts of him that even he had neglected. That evening, Evan found himself walking through the quiet streets of downtown Vermont, the crisp night air carrying the faint scent of pine and rain, his heart beating with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Aunt Laura and Aunt Diane had insisted he join them at a small community charity event, a gathering they promised would be gentle, simple, and meaningful, but Evan had not expected how alive the night would feel. The hall was warm and softly lit, filled with the hum of conversation, clinking dishes, and the faint strains of acoustic music playing in the corner. Volunteers moved gracefully among tables, laughter and shared stories filling spaces that had felt empty for too long. At first, Evan hung back, unsure how to step into this circle of strangers, yet already aware that something about the evening felt important, almost like a chance the universe had handed him. That's when he noticed Claire, a woman standing across the room, her presence quiet yet magnetic, eyes reflecting the soft lights, her smile easy and unforced. Their introductions were casual, almost accidental, but the conversation flowed instantly, as if they had known each other far longer than a single evening allowed. They spoke of books, of quiet mornings and unexpected rain, of small disappointments and the way life could surprise even when it seemed predictable. Evan realized he hadn't felt this kind of connection in a long time, someone who listened, really listened, without judgment or agenda. Around them, the event continued with gentle energy, people sharing moments of kindness, but Evan's focus narrowed naturally to Claire. Every gesture, every laugh, every fleeting glance carried warmth, and for the first time in months, he felt a pull towards something tender, something unhurried, something that might grow. His aunts, observing from a distance, smiled knowingly, allowing him the space to explore the spark forming before him without interference. Time seemed to shift, minutes felt like hours, yet the night moved on, the music soft, the lights glowing like small stars, and Evan felt an unfamiliar courage swell in his chest. He laughed freely, spoke openly, felt emotions he had pushed down for far too long rise gently, filling spaces he had forgotten were empty. Claire shared stories of her own heartbreaks, moments of waiting and hoping, and Evan realized he was not alone in his experiences. The shared understanding created a bond that felt real and significant. As the evening drew toward its close, the hall gradually emptied, but Evan and Claire continued talking, strolling outside under the quiet glow of street lamps, each step light but deliberate, the air between them charged with quiet anticipation. Evan felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, the fear of opening his heart again and the thrill of possibility that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer than loneliness. His aunt's earlier words echoed in his mind, gentle reminders that sometimes love arrives quietly, that opportunities appear when least expected, and that healing can begin in the simplest of ways. By the time he returned home, the city lights casting soft reflections across wet sidewalks, Evan felt something he hadn't in months: hope. His heart was not whole, not yet, but it was awake, alert to possibility, and open to connection. He knew the night had changed something inside him, that life's quiet surprises were no longer beyond reach, and that the path ahead, uncertain as it was, held promise. The event, meant to be just a volunteer evening, had become a turning point, a bridge between past sorrow and the delicate stirrings of new beginnings. And as he walked through his front door, the warmth of his home greeting him, Evan felt that the simple act of showing up, guided by his aunt's careful encouragement, had led him to the first step of a story he was ready to explore, a story where love, patience, and gentle timing could shape his future in ways he had not dared to imagine. The morning the aunts prepared to leave, Evan felt a strange mixture of sadness and gratitude as he moved around his small Vermont townhouse, helping them pack their bags and tidy up after the previous day's quiet but meaningful events. The house felt fuller now, warmer, almost alive with the echoes of laughter, conversation, and the gentle tension of emotions that had begun to stir in him. Aunt Diane hugged him tightly before they stepped out, her familiar energy reassuring, while Aunt Laura grasped his hand, her eyes kind yet serious, and said, "Don't close the door just because it hurt before," and Evan felt a lump in his throat, realizing how much he had needed to hear those words, how much their presence had reminded him of hope and love he thought he had lost forever. As the car pulled away, Evan lingered at the window, watching them disappear down the street, and felt a quiet shift within himself. The emptiness he had grown used to was no longer quite as heavy, replaced by a sense of anticipation he had not felt in months. The events of the past 2 days, the honest conversations, the gentle encouragement, the subtle nudges toward life beyond routine, lingered in his mind like soft sunlight warming a cold room, and he realized that he had been given a gift, the reminder that he could still feel deeply, care openly, and allow his heart to take gentle risks. Thoughts of Claire returned immediately, her quiet smile and easy laughter replaying in his mind, and he understood that the evening at the charity event had been more than a casual outing. It had been a glimpse of what life could offer if he allowed himself to step forward, to be vulnerable, to hope again. Evan began to notice details around him that he had ignored before: the soft hum of his refrigerator, the sunlight glinting off the hardwood floor, the small imperfections in his home that made it human, and he realized that life, like his house, was not perfect, but it was full of possibility, waiting for him to engage with it fully. He thought about the conversations with his aunts, how they had shared their own regrets and lessons, and he understood that love and family were not just about presence but about timing, patience, and the courage to reach out when someone is struggling quietly. The sense of loneliness he had carried for months felt less permanent, replaced by a quiet excitement at the idea that connections could form naturally, that moments of laughter and shared understanding could reignite his heart, and that the world outside his door was not as isolating as he had imagined. Evan reflected on the simple ways his aunts had guided him, without pressure, without insistence, just gentle support, and he realized that sometimes the most profound changes came from subtle interventions, from people who cared enough to show up, not to fix, but to illuminate paths he had overlooked. As the day progressed, he found himself making small plans, deciding to follow up with Claire, to continue participating in the community, and to allow himself to feel without judgment, realizing that life's beauty often arrived quietly, through ordinary acts that became extraordinary in retrospect. The air in his home seemed lighter now, filled with the promise of possibility rather than the weight of regret, and Evan noticed that his own energy had shifted. He moved through the rooms with a sense of purpose, tidying, organizing, and even smiling at small things he would have once ignored. Memories of past heartbreak still lingered, but they no longer felt like chains. They were lessons, reminders of resilience and the importance of keeping the heart open despite past pain. He understood that his aunt's visit had not only been about family care but about guiding him towards self-discovery, showing him that life could still surprise, that love could still arrive in quiet, gentle ways, and that healing often came when one least expected it. Evan thought about the future, the possibilities, the people he might meet, the experiences that awaited him, and felt a surge of gratitude for having the courage to accept help, to engage with life, and to allow himself to hope again. That day, he walked through his home slowly, noticing the sunlight spilling across the floor, the soft hum of distant traffic, and the ordinary beauty of a life ready to be lived fully, realizing that the doorbell that had rung a few days ago was more than a signal of arrival. It was the start of something deeper, a reminder that love, attention, and gentle care could change everything. As evening approached, Evan found himself reflecting on every word, every laugh, every subtle gesture from his aunts and Claire, understanding that the quiet moments often carried the greatest weight, and that life, in its unpredictability, held more promise than he had dared to believe. By nightfall, he sat alone in his living room, the house calm and still, yet filled with a sense of anticipation, knowing that the visit, simple as it seemed, had reshaped his world in ways that would continue to unfold. Evan realized that this was not an ending but a beginning, a chance to embrace connection, to allow love and friendship to grow organically, and to move forward with the awareness that even small gestures, like a visit, a conversation, a shared evening, could leave a lasting imprint on the heart. The memory of his aunt's words, Claire's gentle presence, and the warmth of shared human connection settled deep inside him, giving him the courage to believe in tomorrow, to step beyond routine, and to live fully, open to whatever joys and possibilities life might now offer, knowing that the knock on the door that had seemed ordinary was, in truth, the beginning of everything he had been waiting for.